Alrighty, so we started a new, not really a series, but a trilogy, because there's only going to be 3 weeks in it. But we started a new trilogy last week. And last week we talked about depression, and Marianna shared her testimony, and we went into small group time. It was a pretty good night, I think. I think we had a lot of good conversation, but I need some people to help remind us about some of the things that stuck out to us. So we have a recap share time. So if there was something that stuck out to you from last week, something that you felt that was important, you can come up to the chair, say it. So Colin, come on up, everybody. Give them a nice round click of your pen. No, click of the pen. They're switching it up. Click of the pen. Click of the pen. I don't know, because we have clicker pens now. Oh, smart. All right, Colin, so what stuck out to you last week?
I think what was new for me is looking at how the Bible addresses depression. And I think for a lot of people that struggle with depression, it's a time that you feel that you are in almost that, I think it was like the bottomless pit that we mentioned in one of the passages. I forget where it was from.
Psalms 4.
One of the Psalms.
Yes, 40.
Yeah,
Psalm 40.
40.
Psalm 40.
And it talked about how, no matter how low or how, deep that pit can get, it's always, God always has the strength and that ability to get you through that situation. And then we also talked about how not cutting yourself off is a major importance when you're struggling with depression, because depression already adds that loneliness feeling, and you need people in your life that are going to be able to pull you out of that. And so being able to just reach out, and us maybe knowing that a friend is going through depression, or just that constant check-in, or hey, how you doing? I heard something bad going on in your life. Is there any way I can help you? Because that can keep someone from getting far more deeper in the pit they already are, if they had knowing that other than God, they have people around them that can show the love that God has given us to other people.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We can give a round of applause this time. All right. That is a very good recap. Is there anything else that anybody else would like to add to what Colin said? Anything that stuck out? Anything from last week? All right. Then I will sit in the recap chair for just a moment, because there are a couple things I want to remind you guys about. So, there you go. Thank you. I don't know if that was intentional. It was. Oh, okay. We'll go with it. All right. So, last week when we talked about depression, one of the things that we said at the very beginning was that depression is not a sin. Yes, depression is not a sin. Just like you wouldn't say a broken arm is a sin, some physical injury, or if you got the flu is not a sin. Depression is a mental illness, and so it's not a sin. But it is something that Christians do struggle with, and just people in general struggle with. And there are physical ways to treat that with medicine, therapy. Those are good things. But it's not just a physical issue. It's a mental issue. It's also a spiritual issue. And so we talked a lot last week about different ways that you could approach that as you cry out to God in prayer, even in the midst of your lowest moments, as you find a verse that actually comforts you with what the truth is, or even listening to Spotify songs that remind us of what the truth is. Because a lot of times when you're in a moment of depression, you can't really think clearly about what the Bible actually says, and so it can be really helpful to listen to music that talks about that. But I really like what Colin mentioned about if you are struggling with depression, find somebody that you can trust, that you can just call on a moment's notice, that you can text at a moment's notice, that will be able to reach out and comfort you and encourage you, or remind you of the truth that is a lot of times really hard to see in those moments. So that is what we talked about last week. And this week, we are continuing our conversation by talking about anxiety. And we are going to spend most of our time in small groups, but we are going to do a little bit beforehand where I'm going to just share just some stuff to make sure we're all on the same page. Also, I just remembered, in case you weren't here last week and you missed Marianna's testimony, it's not on YouTube for everybody to see, but if you want the link, I can give that to you so that you can view it, because we don't want people to miss out on that just because you weren't here. But this week we are talking about anxiety. Anxiety is a word that a lot of times we have different ideas of what it means. And we're going to do a little game to kind of illustrate the fact of that. Or not really a game, but a little activity. So if I were to say the word bark, what comes to mind? Dogs. Tree. All right, so if I start talking about bark, maybe half of you would think, oh, a dog. And the other half of you would think tree. What? Wolf. You would think wolf. Some of you think dog. Some of you think tree. Your mind goes everywhere. Now, if I say the word date, what comes to mind if you hear the word date?
Dried fruit.
Fruit. What?
A significant
A significant other. So we got two things. One other thing coming to mind. A calendar. There's another way that date can be used. Can anybody think real quick? It could be a fruit. We have fruit. We have a person that you're going out with. A significant other. We also have a calendar date. What's another way that date can be used? When you are. No. Think back to the relationship. They can be used in two ways with that one. When you are dating somebody. Well, it's still the same basic word.
But it's the same thing almost as like significant other.
It's a little bit different. No, that's like the actual activity. Well, wait, I won't change the word. I'm going on a date with my date. You can say that. That's English. That's grammatically correct.
We are dating. Is that what you're going?
That's totally different.
No.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, the word date can mean a lot of different things. And if I just use that word, you guys, your mind could go to a fruit. It could go to a person you're dating. It could go to a calendar date. And like I said, it could go to an actual date that you're going on. So, when I say the word anxiety, what comes to mind? What? Social anxiety. Yeah. What?
Being nervous.
Being nervous. Overwhelmed. Overthinking. Stress. When the word anxiety pops up, there's a lot of different words that come into mind, a lot of different emotions, or maybe memories or situations. And a lot of times we can have different ideas of what the word anxiety means. So before we go into small groups and talk about this, I just want to talk through 4 different ways that you can define anxiety, because when we understand different ways that it can be described, it helps us understand the conversation a little bit better. It helps us actually fight against it better. So we're going to talk about 4 different ways that anxiety kind of shows itself. The first type is when you see a bear and you're terrified. You go into fight or flight moment. Now, if you see a bear and it is going to attack you,
You run the other way.
you run the other way. Is it a sin to be terrified of the bear and run away? No. It's God's given ability for us to recognize when there is danger, give us a nice adrenaline rush to escape the bear. But this could also be considered a type of anxiety, a type of fear. Fear is another word that comes to mind when anxiety is mentioned. So this would be considered a type of anxiety where you are anxious over the fact that you could be eaten and mauled by a bear or something else. It could be a similar situation or a different situation, but this idea of fight or flight. So that's one type of anxiety. Another type is a disorder. That's another word that comes to mind when you think of the word anxiety. And anxiety isn't just one side of a coin. It's a spiritual issue, it's a mental issue, it's a physical issue, and sometimes it is a disorder. And that has different ways that you can approach that from a medical side. You get therapy, there is different medicine that can help with that. It's something that can be tackled on that perspective. So when you think of the word anxiety, it can be a disorder. And that, like we talked about how depression being a mental illness wasn't a sin, and anxiety being a disorder isn't a sin. That's a product of the fact that we live in a fallen world, which means that our bodies are not perfect. They have flaws, they have mistakes, because one day things will be perfect when God comes again. But right now, there's things that we struggle with. There are things that our bodies can't do perfectly. So anxiety would be an example of that, where it's a product of the fallen world. And then, it can also be a result of something. Or specifically, we're going to talk about a result of sin. You guys remember how a couple weeks ago we had a domino effect of how sin can kind of create a chain reaction. So for example, if I stole something, no. If I stole something, I could be really anxious and worried over the fact that I could get caught. My anxiety in that case is then a result of my sin. If I was lying about something or cheating about something, I could be worried about my deception being revealed, and that could cause anxiety. But it's not because of something else that something happened, it's because of my own sin that that's happened. And sometimes anxiety is caused by your own sin, and the own guilt that you feel, and the own stress from that. But sometimes anxiety is also a result of sin, but not actually yours. And this comes to play a lot in trauma, where especially where something has been done to you that was wrong in the past, something that's not good, somebody else has done to you, and now when you find yourselves in similar situations or just around different circumstances or people, you get triggered, not because of anything that you did, but because of something else that somebody did to you. So anxiety can be triggered by sin, whether it's your own or the sin of somebody else in the past. And one final way that anxiety reveals itself is without trust. Anxiety can be this idea of worry without trust, where, like this guy, where he's spiraling out in all these different directions, thinking about the worst possible case scenarios. If you read some of the words there, he's thinking about money and what his job's going to be and how he has to study. There's all these things that he's concerned about. And sometimes with anxiety in itself can be a sin, something wrong. Because when we do not trust that God is in control, and we are so concerned about the future and what might happen and these different things, it becomes a lack of trust in God. And that is not good, and that is not how God intended it. Now, anxiety, these 4 different ways that we just described, a lot of times those can mix and merge in different ways, and those are just general categories and helpful ways to think through it. And what I want you to hear about anxiety is whether you struggle with one or multiple areas of it, anxiety happens to a lot of people. And that includes Christians. And you are not alone. Probably everybody in this room has experienced some form of anxiety. Now, to be specific, anxiety as a disorder is diagnosed after 6 months of where most of your days are experiencing those symptoms. So that's a little bit different than just being worried on one day. But we've experienced some level of worry or anxiety, probably all of us in this room. And probably even people in the Bible struggle with this in different ways, and you can see kind of examples. And we're going to look at an example today. And there are ways to fight against it, both on a physical way. I mean, there's coping mechanisms, different things and strategies you can have. There's even medical ways that you can approach this, and but there's also a spiritual way, because this is a physical and mental and a spiritual issue. And today we're really going to combat it at a spiritual perspective, because if you just have the more physical ways, you miss out on what is the foundation of where we can be courageous and confident in Jesus. Because without that piece, the other things might get you to a certain place, but you'll never find complete fulfillment. And when you think about anxiety, a lot of times in anxiety, this is the last time before we go into small groups, but with anxiety, a lot of times it's difficult to think through why it's happening. What's triggering you in that moment, in that exact moment? It can be hard sometimes to identify. But when you have the chance, when your mind clears up, when you aren't on edge and nervous and freaked out, take a step back where you can identify and say, okay, what is the thing that is causing this anxiety? Is it a fight or flight moment? Is it a result, or maybe it's something that's been happening for a long time and I should go seek help about it? Maybe it could be something bigger than just one day. Maybe it's a result of something that I've done wrong. Maybe it's something I need to confess. Maybe it's because it's something that was done to me, and I need to try and figure out ways about how I can cope with that, how I can move forward with that and seek healing. And that's a process. All these things are definitely a process, but that one especially is a process. Or maybe it's even just the fact that I am not trusting in this moment. Being able to take a step back helps us identify the problem, helps us move forward. And we're going to have some time now in small groups where you guys are going to go through a passage in Psalms where David was in an extreme moment of anxiety. And you could probably think that in his Psalms you get a lot of different ideas that this is a consistent thing he's going through. But he has a lot of great things to say about it, and we're going to really combat this issue from a spiritual perspective. But at this point, I'm going to pray for us, and then you guys will break out into small groups. Dear God, I thank you that we are not alone in our anxiety, that you are with us, that you empower us and strengthen us, even when we feel like there's no way of escape, even when we feel like we're on edge and we don't even understand why. God, you know why, and you know the truth, and you can point us to the truth, and you are with us every step of the way, and you've given us people to help us in the midst of it. God, I pray that in our small group time that we would be honest and open in our conversations, that we would honor you with that. And I just thank you that we can be here tonight. And all God's people say,